5 in our class, the modern novel. We will talk some more today about early novels and novelists, and we will carry on our analysis of Robinson Crusoe. We will start, let us start talking first. So in the last lecture we talked about Daniel Defoe and the plot of the story and so on. Let us talk today a little bit about the reception of the novel and about the themes and the main topics of the novel. So the novel was published on April 25th, 1719. As we said, Defoe was 59 years old. Before the end of the year, this first volume had run through 4 editions. So 4 editions in 1719, that's a lot. That's a very successful novel. In 1 year, the novel was so popular that they had to republish it 4 times. Within years, it had reached an audience as wide as any book ever written in English. So it became one of the most successful and widely read books in the English language. By the end of the 19th century, no book in the history of Western literature had more editions, spin-offs and translations than Robinson Crusoe, with more than 700 such alternative versions, including children's versions with mainly pictures and no text. So by the 19th century, no book in the history of Western literature had more editions, more spin-off, more translations, more illustrations, children's books. So many stories and books were based on Robinson Crusoe. This is how popular it has become. You will find some images of some of the versions of Robinson Crusoe, some of them in Chinese, some of them in Japanese, in African languages, in all sorts of languages. I guess there's even some in Arabic. There's been a lot of films and television series and cartoons were made of Robinson Crusoe, the story of Robinson Crusoe, to the point that there is a theme, there is a genre, a sub-genre in literature and in film called the Robinsonade. The Robinsonade is a term that was coined to describe the genre, this sub-genre. It's not a real genre, it's a sub-genre. This sub-genre of stories similar to Robinson Crusoe is called the Robinsonade. It's a sub-genre that deals usually with the story of a shipwreck and a desert island, and a story of an individual who survives a storm or an accident or a catastrophe and is stuck on a desert island and have to survive on their own. This sub-genre in literature is usually called the Robinsonade, following the success of Daniel Defoe's novel Robinson Crusoe. Defoe went on to write a lesser-known sequel. He tried to write a sequel to Robinson Crusoe, and he called it, the title was The Farther Adventures of Robinson Crusoe, but it was less successful. It wasn't as successful as Robinson Crusoe. It was intended to be the last part of his stories according to the original title page of its first edition, but a third part, Serious Reflections of Robinson Crusoe, was written. It is a mostly forgotten series of moral essays with Crusoe's name attached to give interest. So the second and third parts never became famous, never reached a wide audience, and the most famous one remains the first part, which is Robinson Crusoe. As far as the themes, we should notice first of all there is the theme of colonialism. This is a time when England and other European states are creating colonies, especially in the Americas, in North and South America. This is the time when they are developing the international slave trade, which is a huge body of trade. Immense amounts of money were involved in the international slave trade, because you have to remember that they kidnapped millions of Africans to work an entire continent, the Americas, North and Latin America. And this is a vast continent, and they needed huge amount of labor, of workforce, to work this new continent. So the international slave trade was the biggest body of trade on earth at the time. It was the biggest trade. So the first theme in Robinson Crusoe is the theme of colonialism. We have England that has colonies now in the Americas, and we have young adventurers like Robinson Crusoe, like Daniel Defoe himself, who want to go for adventures, who look for wealth or adventure or fame, and they go on sea voyages, on ships across the ocean into the new colonies, seeking fame or wealth or stories. And Robinson Crusoe, in that sense, the story of Robinson Crusoe is the true symbol of the British conquest. The whole Anglo-Saxon spirit is in Robinson Crusoe. He represents this whole Anglo-Saxon spirit, the spirit of crossing the sea, building colonies, civilizing natives, converting them to Christianity, saving the natives from cannibalism, from the savagery. A lot of it was imaginary and stories that weren't true. And of course, the amount of destruction that this colonialism caused is not mentioned. So Robinson Crusoe is the true symbol of the theme of British conquest. The whole Anglo-Saxon spirit is in Crusoe. Crusoe attempts to replicate his own society on the island. On the island where he goes, it's a deserted island. There is no human beings in it. There is no civilization. But he applies European technology, agriculture, and even a rudimentary, a simple political hierarchy. There is an idealized master-servant relationship between Crusoe and Friday. Friday is the native, Crusoe is the civilized guy. And there is a master-servant relationship between them. Friday is the servant, Crusoe is the master. Crusoe represents the enlightened European, the civilized European. Friday is the savage, who can only be redeemed, he can only be saved from his barbarous ways through assimilation into Crusoe's culture. Friday becomes a real human being only when he accepts Crusoe's European culture and Crusoe's European rules, that the European is the master and the native is the servant. And this way, Friday is saved from being a savage, and now he becomes a real human being, but he's a servant to the Englishman. Nevertheless, within the novel, Defoe takes the opportunity to criticize the historic Spanish conquest of South America. But of course, Crusoe criticizes Spanish cruelty and destruction and colonialism of Native Americans in Latin America. But that's common in the 17th and 18th century, that English writers would blame the Spaniards for the destruction of Native American colonies, but they wouldn't say much about their own destruction of Caribbean societies or Native American societies, especially in North America. theme of colonialism is very important. You should pay attention to it, because we will come back to it later on when we look at another modern novel from the 20th century, and we want to compare the theme of colonialism from the early novels in the 18th century to the modern novels of the 20th century. Another theme in Robinson Crusoe is the theme of religion. Robinson Crusoe is not a hero. He's not a prince or a king or an aristocrat. He's what you call an everyman wanderer, an everyman, an average, everyday kind of man. He's an everyman, a wanderer, someone who just travels around to become a pilgrim. He's a sort of a pilgrim. He's going around looking for meaning for life, and he finds a sort of promised land on the deserted and desolate island. So you notice there is a very clear Christian religious theme to Robinson Crusoe. Of course, it's not obvious. You have to read between the lines to understand it. Robinson also becomes closer to God on the island, not through listening to sermons in the church, because at this time in Europe, this is the 18th century, is a time after the Reformation. So the Reformation was a rebellion against organized church, and a rebellion against church sermons and church ideology and church. But Robinson Crusoe gets closer to God through spending time alone, closer to nature, and with only the Bible to read. This is how he feels closer to God. So there is still a rejection of organized church, but there is still an element of like Christianity and so on. His central concern is the Christian notion of providence. Providence is fate, that a person who goes on his own in search of meaning, that providence or fate will have some good in store for him. So these are the two most important themes in Robinson Crusoe. One is colonialism, the second one is religion. Of course, there are other themes. We can spend a lot of time discussing each one of them, but this gives you a short, brief introduction about one of the most important early novelists and one of the most important early novels, about the type of the story, the reception of the story, the success of the story, and of course the themes of the story. And I hope you found it useful and interesting, and in our coming lectures we will move to discussing more modern novels from the 19th century, and then our final modern novel, Heart of Darkness, which was published in 1901. So we can say it is an early 20th century novel. And until our next lecture, I bid you farewell. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa ta'ala wa barakatuh.